Today we are going to look at some of the properties, the CSS. I mean, we look at the borders, margin, and padding. Understand? So, but first of all, I'll look at the unit because last week we couldn't talk about the unit. So we will start with the unit before we come to the borders, margin, and padding. So let's dive in. Then I'm going to use the W3 school because it explains a lot of things that is simpler for you to understand. So what is CSS unit? What is CSS unit? CSS has several different units for expressing a length. And many CSS properties take length values, such as we have the width. I hope you've already seen some of the width, margin, padding, and then font size. So that is why I think it's better I just start with the units and then follow it with the border, margin, and padding, because when you are putting borders and margin and padding, definitely this is the unit that you're going to use. So it makes sense to just start with the units and then continue with the padding, margin, and the border. Right? So the length value is a number followed by a length unit as what? Pixels, which stand for px, em, and then rem. Those are different units. So CSS has two types of length units. You understand? And we have absolute units and relative units. So when we want to look at the px, em, rm, if you look at this, normally the CSS absolute unit is mostly what we normally see in our day-to-day activities. You understand? So absolute units are fixed, and the length expressed in any of these will appear exactly that size. Absolute units do not change when the screen size change. So assuming you use an absolute unit, when the screen size changes, the absolute unit doesn't change. And they are not recommended for websites because they are fixed. You understand? Like centimeter is fixed, pixels are fixed. So however, they can be used if the output medium is known, such as for print layout. And the most used absolute unit is pixels. This is mostly the one we use in our websites. Understand? So it is an absolute unit. Px, pixels, and 1 pixels equal to what? 1/96 of what? 1 inch. Understand? So that is a conversion here. And then the centimeter is here, centimeters, millimeters, inch, which is what? 1 inch is what? 96 pixels, right? 1 inch is 96 pixels. And then it's equal to 2.54 centimeters. So this is also another conversion. Point is also what? 1/72 of what? 1 inch. And then picas is also 12 points. So it is a conversion of point to picas. But all these are what we call absolute units. And most of them, we don't use it in our website design. You understand? Most of these are normally seen in a lot of science programs. You understand? Believe it is like laboratory. Some of them are seen there, but like mathematics, you understand? But in normal website, we don't really use the absolute units. But the one we normally feel comfortable using it is the pixels. You understand? So let's see. set font size with pixels. Okay. So if you are going to set using pixels, you can set font size and the size of the font to using pixels. So, and it gives you full control over the text size. If you use pixels, the web page may not scale very well on different screen size. Understand? So it's already giving you the negative of using pixels in your website. If you use pixels, the web page may not scale very well on different screen size. If you remember, well, like when I open my VS Code here, like if I'm going to use this as an example, we talk about the HTML structure, right?
Yeah.
And when we are looking at the HTML structure, we talk about the scale, right? The viewport, you understand, which is what? Scale, initial scale, which is 1. Understand? So here, it determines what? The viewport of the website. So if you are going to use pixels, if you are going to use what? Pixels, the web page may not scale very well on different screen sizes. The reason why this one is here is because of what? Different screen size. Maybe you have a mobile phone, or maybe you have to use a you have to use a mobile phone, or you are using a laptop, or you are using a desktop. So each and every one tool, or each and every machine has its own one viewport. You understand? So this code here, as you see, it helps us, or it helps the browser to adjust to the screen size. But if you are going to use pixels, the web page may not scale very well, and the users cannot adjust the text size in their browser settings. However, users can still use the zoom tool to resize the entire page. Understand? Like here, the way we normally use the zoom tool here, this is the zoom. We can reduce it. You understand? And then it went to smaller, like 67%, or we can increase it to more than like 100%. Understand? But we cannot always be dependent on the zooming and what on zooming. Understand? So we have to look at the exact length that will help us to be able to get a good scale than using the pixels, right? So that it will adjust with every viewport of the any tool that we are using. So now we are targeting the H1 element, which is this one, right?
Instruction.
Right? So
Yeah.
we are going to target the H1, and then we are writing our property as font size, right? Font size. And then we can give it a value, which we can say maybe 20 pixels, right? So here we have used our unit. So this is what we call units. Understand? And a type of unit is what? An absolute unit, right? So for instance, if I want to use 20 centimeter, what happened? Look at what happened. You see how big it is. It reach 2 centimeter. But normally all these things we don't normally use it, because for websites, if we want the website to scale very well, we normally use what? Other elements. You understand? But normally we tend to use pixels. You understand? Because it's the easiest way to normally use in web design. But although it's not preferred, or it's not something that is best for responsive design. You understand? But if you want something to
Normally, which one are they using? If this one is not.
yeah, I'll come to that. So I'm just giving, because we have mentioned already a fixed units, right? That is the absolute units. So we are just on absolute unit. Why is it absolute unit? Because it is fixed. You understand? And if something is fixed, it's difficult to be flexible.
Mm.
I understand. But this pixels is also what have its own advantage where we want something to be fixed. Like we just want the width of something to be fixed, which we don't want to change it.
Mm.
You understand? We can just use what pixels and just leave it like that. But if there is anything that we know that it will help us or it help in our design to look good with respect to the what responsiveness, we are not going to use pixels. You
Mm.
understand? So mostly, if we are looking for to use pixels, we have to look at what type of property are we applying there, pixels. If it is font size, the recommended is not pixels. You understand? And
Mm.
the recommended is not pixels. It should be relative. You understand? Not an absolute unit. It should be relative units. So there are a lot of that's why the last time I told you, while you are designing, always try to look at the property that you are doing, that you are working on. You understand?
Mm.
If you are working on font, which is part of typography, you understand, changing the sizes of the typography, then you have to think of adding what? Using relative units. Because definitely you need to stretch it, you need to you want responsiveness. So building a website most is to look at a responsive website. You understand?
Mm.
Okay. So here we added 20 pixels. So that is also a unit. You can just say 25. That's also a unit, right? So that is mostly what a unit is. It's just a fixed um, unit, and mostly it doesn't help us when we are dealing with the responsiveness because it doesn't adjust to the scale.
Mm.
You understand? Because it is fixed. So it says note, a white space cannot appear between the number and the unit. However, if the value is 0, the unit can be omitted. You understand?
Mm.
Here it gives you a guidelines. You understand? The last time we did something like when we added when you're targeting an element, for instance, if you want to change the color to, let's say, red, if I'm going to apply color, maybe I see color and I wrote something like this, understand, and I see column and I give a color of maybe red. Why is it not working?
The spelling of color.
The spelling of color, meaning we've made a mistake in the spelling of the color, right?
Mm.
So here is the same thing that it's talking about. It says that a white space cannot appear between the number and the unit. For instance, if I am going to use what font size and I said 25. So if I just write 25 and an added space like this, what happened? That pixels is not going to be added because we don't add space in between this. It is
Mm.
always what combined like this. You understand?
Mm.
If you made a mistake and separate it, it wouldn't function. So that is why it is telling you that. But if it's like just 0, you can just leave it at 0 because 0, it means nothing. So if you write 0 like this, you can leave it like that.
Mm.
For the 0, it works fine because 0 is just 0. It means nothing. So it's not needed to just put pixels. You can put pixels, but mostly it's not needed. So that's why sometimes when you see the last time I wrote something like margin, I wrote something like body, and then inside it I wrote margin, and then I give 0. Padding, I also give 0.
Yeah.
So doesn't you can omit the pixels here because it is just 0. I understand. But if it is a number, you have to add what? That pixels to it. And there shouldn't be any space. Understand? So if I assuming that I'm going to add 100, you see 100 pixels, how it looks like. So just make sure you take that into consideration. And then the second one is what? CSS relative unit, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about what? Absolute unit, which are these: pixels, centimeter, millimeters, inch, point, and what? Picas, right? And then we come to relative units. Relative unit specify a length relative to another length, like parent length, root element, or viewport. But now look at, we are targeting this section, right?
Yeah.
This is the section, right? And the section is where? Here.
Yeah.
And inside the section, what do we have?
H1.
And what?
Paragraph.
And paragraph. So we have two what? Elements, right?
Yeah.
Inside. Okay. So we give the width of the what? We said the width of, let's say the width of the paragraph is what? 50%, right?
Yeah.
Because for now, if we leave the length of the is what? It adjusts to the length of what? It takes normally, it's like with the section doesn't have the what? A length. If we leave it like this, because this section now we say it doesn't have a length.
Length.
So its length will depend on the length inside.
Hello?
You understand? So for now, if I say width, I say 20 to understand it better. So if hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so for now, let me add border here so that you can see what is happening, right? So now I will add, okay, what I have to do is now, let me just delete the H1. I'll remove this H1 for now and leave only the paragraph, right? So for now, we have the section, and then I'll target the paragraph, and then I'll also add border to it. Border, 2 pixels, solid, and I see green, right? So what happened? The paragraph also has its border, right?
Yeah.
And then the section, which is the container now, also has its border, right? So now, what are we going to do? Now, let's see width of what? The paragraph is 400 pixels. So now this width of the one which is inside is 400 pixels, right? So this has its own width. But imagine we said this also has width, and we say let's make it as, this is 400. So let's try to say, oh, this width has maybe 300 pixels. What happened? You see it overflows, right?
Yeah.
But normally, this has to be the biggest, and this one will be inside. You understand? So that is how you see it. For instance, if I do something like this, you see it is fixed because it's what we are using pixels.
Yeah.
You understand? It's fixed. That's why you see it is here, it's pixels, it cannot be scale. You understand? So for now, if I say here to be 500 pixels, this is where it means that here is what remaining here to be 100 pixels. Understand? So here it takes what? This is the parent, which is the section. So whatever I put inside here, understand, it looks up to this place, this one. You understand? So that is why here they say that the unit specify a length is relative to another length, like parent element, root element, or viewport. You understand? So some of the relative units are EM, relative to the font size of the parent element. EM is relative to the font size of the parent element. What is the font size? For instance, the parent element has a font size. We see font size, because here doesn't apply font size, but normally if we say font size, it takes let's see font size, we see 500 pixels. What happened? Which one did you apply the 500 to? Is it not there? The section,
Yeah.
but it's applied to the inside what? Paragraph, right? So here, if I see the font size here is also 300, you see it has reduced. So what about if I say the font size here is 600? Let me make it smaller, because normally what we normally do is that here, if we put like 50%, right? So here, whatever it is here, let's say the font size here, it is 20. So this 20%, it takes what? It looks relative to what? To this 50%. You understand? Because this one is the child and this one is the parent. So that is why what you have to look at there, how the length works. You understand? So the X is relative to the X height of the current font, which is rarely used. And then we have relative to which of this, which one is 0, CH. Some of them like fractional units, which is what? Equal or one part of the available space, which we also sometimes use. And rem relative to the font size of the root. So mostly we normally prefer to use the rem, because when you look at the rem, it's saying relative to the font size of the root. So if you are talking about the root, which one is the root? Remember?
Yeah.
So we talk about the root, we talk about the HTML, or if we are going to use CSS, since we are targeting all of the universal selector, we say what? Star, right? So here, whatever amount that we give, the children will look up to those amounts. You understand? So if, for instance, we see the weight of this is, let's say, 50%. So anything that we add here, we look up to this 50%, because this is what? The general selector. So that is how this one. Mostly we use this rem or what? View width, meaning relative to 1% of the width of the viewport. You understand? And then full width of the viewport, meaning VW. You understand? So imagine here we use font size and we say 100 VW. You see what it takes. It takes all the viewport, what you see. It's outside that you cannot even see it clearly. Understand? So all of this, you can just remove this. And then say you remove this. Listen. Normally, we don't add these two. Let's look at how it's become big. Because it takes the viewport. When I talk about the viewport, mostly I'm talking about this. Let me use the dev so that you can see it clearly. So imagine I put this. So when I talk about the viewport, I'm talking about this. Look at when I shrink it, you see how it looks. I understand. So when we talk about the viewport, I'm talking about this that it depends on how you squeeze it, and it becomes smaller like a phone, or you make it wider like a desktop. So here there is what we call dimension, which is responsive. So normally when we are designing a website, we normally look at the type of what devices that we are going to use. So normally if you click here, you see a lot of what devices. So these determine the sizes of the. For instance, if you are designing on iPhone SE, you know that the size of iPhone SE is. You can click on it and you see the size of iPhone SE. And so when you are designing,
Then
whatever you
according
design,
to
so whatever you are designing here, it takes the size of what the iPhone SE. You can also look at the custom. Understand? So mostly this is what we normally use when you are designing and when you are checking the responsiveness of any website. Understand? So you look at all these things. But if you want to make it freely, you can look at it in this way so that you can either increase it and see how it looks. Understand? So if I'm going to choose any of these, it will change the size of it. You see how it looks. So most of the time, that is how you can even click here and then go to the device. There are a lot of them here too. You can select some of them. I understand. So some of them have been selected, but you can also go here and select some of them and add them, depending on your design. I understand. So that is how it is. So this one is a full desktop size. I understand. So the unit is just make sure you add, you know exactly what property you are applying the unit to, and then you are good to go. Understand? The view height, because it's the same thing. This is width. Understand? So this is what height. Understand? Viewport height, and then this is what minimum, which is 1% of viewport smaller dimension, and the maximum, which is larger dimension. And we also have what percentage. So mostly these are those normally that we use because it is relative. You understand? That's why you see the description will give you like relative, so relative to, because it looks at its parents. You understand? Because if it is in a box, you understand? If for instance, something is in the box and because it has a boundary, that thing which is inside the box, it's looking at the size of the box. You understand? So if you are going to put something inside the box, definitely you have to look at the size of the box before you put. If you put something bigger, it will not enter into the box, right? But for instance, if you have something like a spanner, something which spring, you understand, and you want to put it in the box, even if the spring is larger than the box, because it is a spring, it is what flexible, right? So you can squeeze it to be smaller, and it will still enter into the box, right? So that is mostly what you have to look at when you are using the length. I mean the units. All right.
yeah.
Okay. So when you talk about the viewport, it says that the browser's window size. right? The browser window size. And 1 VW is equal to 1% of the current width of the browser's viewport. So if the viewport is 500 pixels wide, it means one viewport is definitely 5 pixels. And talking about the tip, the EM and REM unit are perfect for creating scalable and responsive websites. Understand? So normally we depend on EM and RM. EM and RM stand for, we can look at what they stand for. What do you see? EM stand for elements, but miniature, or simply relative to current font size or parent element. That's what I was talking about. And REM stand for root what? Element miniature, right? And they are relative unit used for sizing, right? EM scale based on the font size of each direct parent or current element. You understand? Causing what? Potential compounding effects. But the REM scales based only on the root, which I talk about the HTML. Understand? So HTML element font size, ensuring consistent, predictable sizing. So most of these lengths we normally look at or use it when we are looking at the font size, because those are the things that we need it to be responsive. I understand. Even though some are also used when we are using a layout, like the margin, padding, you understand. And all of this is we made this choice based on responsiveness. You understand? If not, you could have just used pixels as a fixed unit. But because we are thinking about the responsiveness of each and every device that we are using. Because if you design a website, you are not only using it on desktop. You understand? Your website must be responsive when the person is using a mobile phone, because the size of a mobile phone is smaller than that of the desktop. So that is why we normally look at the EM and REM, which are relative units, and because of their responsiveness. You understand? And normally what we apply, the property that we apply those to is font size or font, because when we talk about the font, we are looking at the typography. You understand? So the EM unit is relative to the font size of the parent element. So if the parent element has a font size of 16 pixels, then 2.5 EM would result in 40 pixels. So instead of writing 40 pixels, we can write it equivalent as 2.5 EM, which is better for font size, right? So if the following example, the text size in EM is the same as the previous example in pencil. However, the EM unit allows the user to adjust the text size in the browser settings. You understand? So even look at here, it uses in pixels. This is base font size. But when you look at, when we are 2.5 EM, which is best in terms of responsiveness, and because it can adjust itself, make sure you use EM or REM, or if it's possible, you can also use percentage. You understand? But for responsiveness, we always look at the EM and the REM. You understand? And REM, as I told you, relative to the font size of the root. You understand? HTML. But unlike EM, which is relative to the font size of each parent, so EM is for parents, but REM is for root element, right?
Mm.
REM always refers to the font size of the HTML element, regardless of its position in the document tree. So this makes REM very useful for creating scalable and responsive design. So for instance, this one, the EM, what only relative to the font size of each parent element, right? So each parent element, let's say this one, the parents is what? The section, and the child is what? The P. So the P is looking at the parent element, which is a section. You understand? Even though you use it here, but it will only what adopt, or the scaling will only affect the parents because it is inside this. So it means that if you are using EM, all of whatever you are using, the section, it has to be relative to each parent element. Here, the section. You understand? But if you are using what? REM, it's what? It's looking at the root. The root. So it means that it makes all whatever you're writing here inside the body will be what? Will be to scale very well and be responsive. You understand? So for instance, it says which CSS unit is considered as an absolute length unit? Can you guess? Are you there?
Evet.
Okay, so
Yeah.
which one? Which one is the answer?
Rem?
Which CSS unit is considered an absolute length? Absolute length, not relative
Absolute.
length. Absolute length.
Okay. Physics?
Okay, pixel. I understand. Because REM is relative, the viewport or view width is relative, and what EM is also what relative.
Yeah.
Elements miniature, right? So it's also what relative. So it's only the pixels which is absolute, right? So that means it's correct. Understand? So it's just a short or brief introduction of these pixels. Understand? So if you look at the example, most of them are applied to what? The font size. Understand? Because it is what we are normally targeting.